Thank you for joining us for today's webinar presented by WireNet member Simplex IT. This is a six-part series designed to demystify key IT issues that business leaders face. For those of you unfamiliar with WireNet, we work to keep manufacturing companies around. We responsively help with individual company needs like graffiti removal, help identifying financing sources, and recruitment of new talent like accountants, machinists, and plant managers. We also offer programs like today's webinar to proactively help manufacturers thrive. Like many nonprofits, companies join WireNet to support our mission. One of those members is Simplex IT. For those of you who don't know Bob, he's one of those geeks who speaks English. He can help implement technology solutions that don't get in the way of your daily business. With that, I will turn it over to Bob to discuss today's topic, helping small companies avoid threats and find cost-effective tools. Bob?
Yay. Thanks, Ann. So for those of you who have not heard me speak, first of all, gosh, you're in for it. Well, yeah, we'll call it a treat, rounding up. But here's the thing, is that this is not going to be a sales pitch. This is going to be really talking about giving you an idea of what the threat landscape is without regard to a specific technology or service or the like, and then what are the strategies small, medium businesses can go with. And we're really going to try hard to avoid this world of doom and everybody's out to get you and all that kind of stuff. But by the same token, we're not going to ignore the realistic threat. Everybody's been muted as far as sound goes, except for me, which is not necessarily the best of ideas, as my wife would tell you, but we're going to go with that anyway. If you do have any questions, please feel absolutely free to use the texting capacity of the Skype for Business, and we'll handle it, because I've heard me speak before, and boy, is it exciting. In any case, thanks, Ann, for the intro, and really, we go through all the gibberish. Simplex IT, we are managed service providers that not only are the IT department for companies, but we also extend and enhance existing IT departments, so blah, blah, blah. We have these 5 programs. Most recently, we've added our training. We do have actually a free, about hour-long or so, Windows 10 online training course for end users that's free. Contact us, Bob at simplex-it.com, and we'll get you a link for that. I also published a book earlier this year, a CEO Survival Guide to Information Technology, for management folks who don't want to become a geek but want to deal with IT issues. That's available. And we do a lot of these events. Our favorite ones, of course, bar none, are the ones with WireNet because this is the group I'm speaking to right now. But we do a lot of them. Our next one is going to be next week, where we're going to talk about just an overview of Microsoft's product roadmap for 2018. And then we'll be back with another WireNet for basic end-user IT training. These are all free and open, all that. So got good stuff coming up. Enough of that silliness. All right. So whenever I talk about cybersecurity, one of the first things I want to do is to make sure people are aware of the difference. And 4 or 5 years ago, for the most part, whenever we talked about security, the risk to security was either a targeted attack on a company, such as, oh, it's a good target, where a company was actually compromised because of all of the data. So it was like, let's go knock off Fort Knox, and we're going to get a lot of money. Well, or we're going to just make people's lives miserable by causing mayhem and causing information or systems failures. Well, then ransomware came around, and the bad guys found a way to make it pay, even if they were dealing with smaller companies. And here are some numbers that kind of really, to me, drill home. This is according to FBI statistics for reported, and that's the key word, reported incidents or complaints, as they call them, over the past few years. And the thing I draw your attention to is, and again, these are reported, so there are a ton more that were not reported, but the total number of complaints from 2012, with 290,000 approximately, really hasn't changed a whole heck of a lot. It's only gone up by 10,000 between 2012 and 2016. But the losses That's huge difference. That's almost tripled in the same period of time. So the impact it's had on businesses is significantly greater. And again, just like the legitimate people in the IT world have found ways to make goods and services very available to small, medium companies, Office 365, Google Docs, any of the cloud-based services, cloud-based ERP, Salesforce.com, all of those are now bringing tools to companies at unbelievably low prices. So too, the bad guys have found out, here's how I can maybe I'll only make $500 from this small company, but I'll make that with a tenth of the effort, and I'll make it over 500 companies. So the bad guys have become financially incentivized. That wasn't there before. That's the huge difference. And this is just one way to show how are they doing that? The same way that companies are increasing their productivity, automating. So the way that the bad guys get into and get the value out has been almost completely automated. So they've found ways to get into an organization's IT infrastructure, which are the servers and the workstations and all that kind of fun stuff, and then essentially launch their threat, launch their encryption tools, launch their whatever, and then, in the case of ransomware, they extort. They essentially change all of the data so that the end users can't get access to it, and then says, hey, if you want me to unlock your data, send me the money. And if it weren't for the fact that we're talking about bad guys, we'd give these guys awards for being the entrepreneurial spirit that they're encompassing. They're just doing a great job of just creating this wonderful product. Okay, it's evil, but come on. And delivering it so effortlessly and flawlessly from a marketing and sales standpoint, and then, collecting the money. So, and here's another thing that most people don't realize. The most popular form of malware in 2017 was actually the WannaCry. And the WannaCry was prevented not by antivirus software or malware or training. It was actually by just keeping your Windows programs up to date. If you patched the security updates that Windows was making available, you would not be hit by this malware product. And yet it was the most prominent attack for the first, 9 months of 2017. And how it works again: penetration, deployment, and encryption. I'm going over this really, really quickly just to give us all a kind of an idea of our starting point. Okay. And here's something that I find really interesting. So what happens as our organizations create products, so do our competition, and the competition comes up with new ways. Henry Ford famously said back 100 and some years ago, you can have any color car you want as long as it's black. Why? Because they were all about optimizing the manufacturing process. They weren't about customization. Malware is going through the exact same thing that manufacturing did over the past 25 years or so. They're now coming up with optimization. So now, this is an example, and this is a true screenshot from a malware infection, a ransomware infection, where you now have choices. You can either pay $120 and all your data will be restored, or if you want to, you can also pay $50, and that'll give you immunity. So it'll actually add a piece of software that'll block you from being hit again. And $20 will remove the infection, the attack. If you just want one file, you only want one file, $30. But if you want that proof of life concept we hear in the movies, we'll restore 2 free random files for you just to show you that we can do it. This is the bad guys putting these options in place. So the bad guys are coming up with more and more innovative ways to deliver their product, and more innovative ways to allow their victims, to actually take advantage of, pay the ransom. So that's what we're dealing with. Whenever we talk about how do we want to protect our organizations from a cybersecurity standpoint. So understand, before we go into how to solve it, understand not only the complexity of the problem and the complexity of the risks, but also the evolving nature of it. The bad guys are financially incentivized to constantly update their product, to constantly update their marketing and sales pitches, to constantly update and add to it, just like everybody else who's out there selling a product. Now, I am not in any way, shape, or form condoning them. I am not in any way, shape, or form condemning them, but I'm a firm believer, know your enemy. And these guys, and they also, for the most part, live in countries that actively defend and promote their services and their products, which means they're able to hire the highest qualified people in their area and pay them good living wages. And in a lot of cases, and I think this is hilarious, the product, meaning the malware that they create, actually has code to explicitly not attack a computer that's located in their country. So, for example, Russia, no surprise here, has a lot of companies that develop this code, and a lot of the code will look to see if the IP address, the internet location of the infected computer is Russia. It won't do anything. It won't attack it. Why? You don't poop where you eat. Okay? And then there's also mobile devices. And keep in mind that mobile devices were pretty much simple until about 6 years ago, when people started being able to do work, both work for their home, their bank accounts, their shopping, and it wasn't until about 2 or 3 years ago that people really started to do business. Okay? So what ends up happening here is that you have a lot of developers who were starting to develop programs for the mobile, and a lot of them decided, hey, let's do bad things. Let's do malware. And a lot of people would go ahead and they would install and configure malware without knowing that they did it. My favorite example of that was the flashlight application. You go to the Google store or whatever, and I want to download a flashlight app. And the flashlight app, at the time that this was the most popular, had about 3 million downloads. So 3 million people installed it. And of those 3 million people, the first thing that every one of them would see when they install it would be this question going, hey, this application needs access to your network passwords, to your documents, to your files, to all of your everything on your system, your pictures and everything. Is that okay? This is a flashlight. It lights a light. That's all it does. Why would it need access to all that information? But you had millions of people who would say, yep, that's okay. And not only that, but then you had hundreds of thousands of people, and it was, I think, about 200,000 or 300,000 people, who then rated it 4 or 5 stars. It had a 4.8 star rating. So you're basically telling this program that it can have complete access to all the information on your phone, free and unfettered, and I want to tell the world how much I like it. Needless to say, everybody got in. This was malware. This would essentially track everything that we were doing, aggregate it, communicate it, use it. And the world is full of those products. And the security world was actually rather slow in terms of developing malware protection and management programs and services for mobile devices. It's caught up for the most part, but it's still got a ways to go. In fact, 3 years ago, the number one provider of free anti-malware, keyword being anti-malware software for the Android platform, admitted publicly that actually not only did their software not do anything to protect against malware, but it in fact itself was malware and was tracking it and then selling it to companies as far as browsing patterns and all of that kind of fun stuff. These are just some of the threats that were discovered in the first 3 quarters of last year on the Android. And then the next thing I just want to show is the internet, or excuse me, the internal network for organizations has really changed. We started with a pretty simple We had our servers and we had our workstations. That was pretty much our network. And then we added perimeter devices like firewalls and routers, and now we've got voice, video systems, all that. Every one of those is a potential breach of your network. Most people remember Target got hacked, and all of their customers' information, the credit card information, all that kind of stuff got hacked. Technically, they didn't. They're actually the vendor who is responsible for maintaining their air conditioning. They're the ones who got hacked. But they had access to Target's network in order to monitor the air conditioning of the corporate headquarters. And what happened was, and this was in fact Target's fault, is Target didn't create a wall between the network components that comprise the air conditioning and the rest of their corporate network. And because of that oversight, very simple oversight on the part of Target, they were able to, the bad guys were able to compromise the data. But the original insertion into the network was actually from a friendly source that got compromised, that got hacked. Then the other issue is phishing. Boy, is phishing a big issue. We've all gotten those emails that try to get us to do something. And it could be as simple as, it looks like, hey, you know, the Nigerian prince is, of course, the prototypical version where, hey, I've got this much money to give and I'm just looking for someone to reply to my email. Okay, we're all caught up on that one. But now they've also made it so that they have very well formed, they look like official emails. Every year around this time, there's a bunch of bad guys who make it look like it's an IRS scam, that, hey, we want to deal with your returns. Please click here to validate your information, so on and so forth. There's also a lot of good ones for Microsoft. That says, hey, your Microsoft 365 service is unstable, click here, and you put in your credentials, so on and so forth. We did a YouTube video about a week or so ago on one of the more recent scams on that one. And then there's spear phishing, where they actually identify you as an individual, and they found enough information about you so that they can custom make a email that essentially wants you to do something specific that almost sounds legitimate because they've done some research. The phishing itself is incredibly low cost. Incredibly, not even pennies per email. It's less than a penny per email. So they can do thousands of them without breaking a sweat, and all it takes is a couple people who are just at that point in time, they're distracted enough, they just say, oh, yeah, fine, I'll just do it. Spear phishing costs more, but you're also going to have a higher buy-in rate because people are going to be more easily fooled because it looks legit. An example of this would be, my email is bob@simplex-it.com. What if someone goes out and buys a domain, simplex-1t.com, and sends somebody, they learn somebody that I already know, an email from bob@simplex-1t.com, and is able to form an email that looks like it might come from me? Okay? That's it looks like a legitimate email. So the question there is are you training your employees? And we'll go into that in a moment. Why do people do this? And I'm not going to go through this list, but it's essentially to gain power. Power through money, power through information, power through influence. It's for them to gain some sort of valuable advantage. Now let's start talking about what we're going to do about it. We commonly refer to this as the 4 pillars of a security strategy. If you do 3 of these, it's kind of like if you've got 4 doors to your home and you lock 3 of them, great. 3 out of 4 burglars will be thwarted. The 4th one's getting in, though. It's a combination. It is a layered approach, and it is not a fire and forget approach. You can have a relatively poorly behaving product, but that's well managed and well maintained, will do a better job than a good product that's ignored. You gotta feed it. You gotta feed this stuff, and we'll talk about this in a minute. Products, and by the way, we're gonna return to this in a minute. And we are making this PowerPoint will be available. If you've registered for this webinar either through WireNet or us, we will email this, so you'll get this information. Plus, I think this is going to be up online. So products, that's where you get your traditional antivirus, your endpoints, your firewalls, all of that kind of fun stuff. There are a number of them. You have to make sure that they're configured, and you have to make sure that they're updated and up to date. And that's one of the biggest things. So you can usually find, if you go to Amazon or CDW or even Office Max or the like, you can find these packets of antivirus, malware protection, any of these kind of things, and they're fine, relatively speaking. Some do better than others, but not only do they have to be installed, but they then have to be managed. They have to be watched or monitored in some way. And whether or not you're doing it through a central console or administration, which for larger organizations, I would say larger than 10, you should have some kind of centralized management so that one person can look and say, oh, look, I expect all 10 workstations to be patched and up to date, and they are, yay. It's not much more expensive than the packs you buy at the CDWs and all that kind of fun stuff, but it's a lot easier and low cost as far as overhead and management and maintenance. And the firewalls, basically, here's the thing with that. If you've got a firewall that's older than 3 years, it's obsolete. And the reason being is because security has changed and transformed enough that it just hasn't kept up. What's a firewall? It's exactly what the name implies. And that is that you've got some kind of boundary, and in this case, a firewall is a boundary between your business and the rest of the world. And essentially is going to watch or monitor any and all traffic, whether it be voice traffic, data traffic, web browsing traffic, email, any of that stuff. It's going to monitor it. Older firewalls just make sure that the right traffic goes to the right place. Newer firewalls include a lot more. So, people, you got to train them. You absolutely have to train them. There's a lot of tools that are available, online training, all of that kind of stuff, as far as what is an appropriate thing, or what are appropriate links to click on and inappropriate links to click on. And how are you managing that and monitoring that? Processes. If you're adding new technology, what are you doing to make sure that new technology is secure? That should be an item on the project plan. If you have older technology, as it ages, what are you doing to maintain the level of security? What are you going to do in terms of any kind of breach? How are you going to report it? How are you going to measure it? How are you going to discover it? Policies. Boy, is this one ignored a lot. And we just did this last month for the WireNet webinar. Do people know what they're allowed to do or not allowed to do? Do people know what they can do with their own personal devices? Do people know what personal things they can do on their business device? Is someone allowed to update their Facebook on their work computer? Is someone allowed to access work email on their home computer? What about their mobile devices? So on and so forth. You can't expect your employees to be able to play by the rules if you've never bothered to tell them what the rules are. This is a good list, and you can actually use this as a checklist. These are the most common technologies, products or services that are used when we're talking about security. And just to go through these really quickly, patching and updating, that's to make sure Windows is constantly updated, Androids are constantly updated, iDevices are constantly updated, but that also includes not just Windows updates, but also the applications like Chrome, Java, all that kind of fun stuff. Advanced endpoint security, it's what we used to call antivirus, but viruses comprise only about 30% of attacks of all the companies undergo. Spam filtering, how can we clean those up? Firewalls, also called unified threat managers. Shadow IT, that's basically the dark web that we look for credentials, see if they end up in the dark web. Backups. Backups are the final line of defense for everything we do. You got to monitor. If you're not monitoring, you don't know if stuff is working. Authentication methods and password management, whether it be single sign-on or two-factor authentication. Employee training, that is so cheap to do, and so few companies do that. Encrypting your data, making sure people use wireless networks appropriately, and cyber insurance is becoming more and more of an issue as well. So, and we actually did Simplex IT did a webinar on cyber insurance just a month or so ago as well. Minimal. You need to have some kind of antivirus on all devices, and you need to know that it's up to date. And there are relatively lower cost versions of that you can do. And then an advanced firewall, if it's older than 3 years, you need to replace it. You need to be able to review your remote access. How are people accessing their work from home? Patch your stuff. There's so many low-cost ways to do patching that's an easy one. Same thing for training. The mobile devices, of course, and encryption. Those are all options as well. But then you got to monitor them and you got to manage them. If you do the firewall, the endpoints, the training, and the monitoring and managing it, you're going to really take care of an overwhelming majority of your issues. That's how you can maintain the cost on that. The high points. As we kind of wrap things up, the bad guys, all they have to do is find one door in. You got to you got to configure and manage the devices and keep them up to date. And you're not an expert. I would say bring in somebody, whether it be Simplex IT, and we will have free consultations with anybody, whether it's just a one-man shop or 500-person or 1,000-person organization. More than happy to have any kind of conversation or review. And it doesn't ever end. So I'm going to be talking about stuff 6 months from now that didn't exist today, as far as on the security side. And again, why? Because the bad guys are incentivized. You gotta have backups. You absolutely have backups at the end of the day. And here's the thing: we just brought on a company that has 12 servers and about 150 employees or thereabouts. And one of the reasons that they went with us was because we were able to tell them right out of the gate they haven't had a real backup in about 3 years. Okay, about 20% of our companies, when we brought them on first, they either weren't getting any backups or they thought they were getting a lot more backed up than they were. So absolutely test and validate your backups. If you want, because I'm going to wrap up here, we would love to talk to you about security or any IT issues in your organization. We'll do a dark web report in your organization. I'll also send you a free copy of my book. It's a little late towards winter, but if you ever do need firewood or kindling, it does burn. It's made out of paper, so it comes in useful in some ways. Email me at bob@simplex-it.com if you're interested to give you a review on that. And really, and I apologize for going through this stuff so quickly, but there is so much information here. So, and then we've got another session in April coming up, as well as other stuff happening, and that's what I got.
Well, thank you, Bob. That was informative as always. So we do hope you can join us next month, where our topic will be on providing basic end-user IT training without having training staff. What should you be clicking? Thanks a lot. We'll see you next month.
Yay.